Hello everyone and welcome to ACE Afrikaans, where today we're going to take a look at sentence structure or otherwise known as word order. So Stompie is a mnemonic device used to remember the order in which the parts of our sentence are written. Let's take a look at each of these. So my subject is normally placed first in my sentence because this is an active voice sentence. It is also the active participant in my sentence, so it's going to be actioning the verb or making something happen. Examples: ek, as in I, jy, which is you singular, die man, the man, and a kar, a car. Let's take a look at our first verb position. The first verb slot has to contain a verb in Afrikaans, and it can only contain one verb. Any extra verbs will be moved to our second verb position, but we'll take a look at that in a second. If there is a modal verb in our sentence, it has to be placed in this position, unless there is also a time verb. But we'll also have a look at that going forward in the precedence of which verbs get placed first. Examples of main verbs: sit, eat, and staan, sitting, eating, and standing. These verbs can act on their own. They can be written down independently. So these are verbs that we normally encounter. Then we get time verbs, which are a kind of modal verb. Sal is our modal verb of future tense. Gaan is also sometimes used to indicate future tense, but it's not 100% the same. Sal means will, and gaan means I'm going to. Het is our modal verb for the past tense, so it indicates my sentence is being written in the past tense. We can also reserve this spot for past tense modal verbs, but we will take a look at that in more detail when we take a look at past tense. Next up, we have our modal, auxiliary, or sometimes also called helping verbs. Wil means I want to, and I know that can cause some confusion. Wil does not mean will. Sal means will, and wil means I want to. So wil, I want to, is my modal verb of desire. Kan, meaning can, is my modal verb of ability. Moet, I must or I have to, is my modal verb of compulsion. And mag means I may, which is my modal verb of permission. We also sometimes encounter double verbs. This means that it is two verbs joined by and, or in Afrikaans, two verbs joined by en. These verbs are seen as being done within the same time frame. Now, if they can be done at the same time, it's going to cause a little bit of a complication when we get to past tense, but it's very easy to work around so that we can tell the difference between two verbs being done at the same time and two verbs being done separately, but within the same time frame of our sentence. But again, we'll take a look at that when we get to past tense. Next up, we have our adverb, when it is one word, or an adverbial phrase if it's more than one word, of time. And we can have multiple adverbs or adverbial phrases of time within this slot. This describes when our action is being done. Examples include vandag, today, oor 'n rukkie, in a little while, in die verlede, in the past, tydens my tienerjare, during my teenage years. Next up, we have our object. Now, this is the non-active participant, a person or a thing in our sentence that the action is being done to. So something is happening to it. Whatever my subject is doing, it is happening to the object. Some examples could also be the bal, the ball, a glas water, a glass of water, my vriend, my friend. Next, let's take a look at the adverb or adverbial phrase of manner. It describes how my action is being done. For example, vinnig, meaning quickly, stadig, meaning slowly, met enthousiasme, meaning with enthusiasm. Next, we have our adverb or adverbial phrase of place, and this describes where the action is taking place. For examples, in my kamer, in my room, op die tafel, on the table, by jou huis, at your house. Now, let's take a look at our second verb slot or our second verb position. This is very important because all verbs that cannot fit into verb 1, because remember, only one verb can be written in the first verb position, and it always has to contain a verb, but sentences are often complex and contain more than one verb. They're all going to gather in this verb 2 position. For expedience, a lot of teachers refer to this when we move a verb to our verb 2 slot or verb 2 position. They say we're moving it to the end or the back of the sentence. This is technically incorrect, but as long as we understand that when someone says move a verb to the back of the sentence or the end of the sentence, what they mean is to move it to the second verb position. So because multiple verbs can end up within verb positions, it's important to know the order of priority in which verbs need to be written. The first verb is always going to be sal, meaning if we have multiple verbs vying for order or priority within the same slot, then sal will always be written first. After that, we're going to be writing our other modal verbs, kan, mag, wil, and moet. Only then will we be writing our main verbs, sit, eet, skryf, skop, sit, eat, write, and kick. And then lastly, we're going to have our exceptions. Now, I know exceptions can sometimes be uncommon, but these exceptions are extremely common. So it is a very good idea to memorize them and to learn them off by heart because they're going to come up quite often. Is, was, wees, which is be. So we can already see the first three is, and its past and future tense form. Het being my indicator for past tense, in word, which means become, which is going to be my indicator for passive voice. So 3 tenses are included here, present, past, and future tense, so you can see why it's going to come up a lot. So let's take a look at how verb 1 and verb 2 interact and when this would be the case. So in my example sentence, ek skryf 'n brief stadig in my kamer om te kommunikeer. I write a letter slowly in my room to communicate. I only have one verb, skryf, write, and I don't have a verb 2. But should I now introduce a modal verb into my sentence, it's going to take priority to be written down in verb 1. Ek wil 'n brief stadig in my kamer skryf. So wil meaning I want to, and skryf meaning write. In English, we would just say, I want to write. And this often causes quite a bit of confusion amongst English speakers because Afrikaans splits up its verbs. So ek wil 'n brief stadig in my kamer skryf has the same meaning as I want to write a letter slowly in my room. I can now go ahead and make this sentence future tense by adding first verb sal, which is my indicator of future tense, translating it directly into English, I will. And then will, you will notice, also has to move to my verb 2 position, causing those two to now decide what the priority is between them. And since my priority is sal, then any auxiliary verbs, and only then do I get my main verbs, it's quite easy to figure out in what order they need to be written in. Lastly, let's take a look at the infinitive. The infinitive describes the reason behind the action being taken. It is identified by te preceding a verb. It is very similar to English, where to precedes an infinitive. Now, my infinitive can also contain a time, object, manner, and place, but it's going to work slightly different from English. In English, we cannot place my time, manner, object, or place, these adverbial phrases or words, in between te and my verb, and we can't do that in Afrikaans either. It's going to cause a grammatical mistake called a split infinitive. Now in English, we add these adverbs or adverbial phrases after the infinitive verb, but in Afrikaans, we created a placeholder word, om. Now, om does not have a direct translation into English because it works differently, but just treat it as an indicator that the infinitive is starting. Om te rus then be translated to rest. Om vandag te rus, to rest today. So you can see the adverb of time was now placed before my infinitive verb, but that indicator shows that it is part of my infinitive. Now, there are three different kinds of infinitives that we will be working with. Obviously, there are more, but these are the three most common ones. Te is my stock standard to do something. But then we also have behoorte, which is I have to or I ought to do something. Ek behoort te rus, I ought to rest. Ek behoort vandag te rus, I ought to rest today. Now you'll notice that there is no included in the sentence because a placeholder is no longer necessary, because now I have a meaning-carrying word, a word that carries meaning that's doing it for us. I ought to or I have to. The negative version of the sentence would be ek hoef nie, I don't have to. Ek hoef nie te rus nie would be translated to I don't have to rest. Ek hoef nie vandag te rus nie would be translated to I don't have to rest today. Don't worry about the double negative for now. We'll go over that when we get to negative forms. So let's take a look at a standard Afrikaans sentence. Ek, meaning I, a subject. Skryf being my verb 1, to write. Vandag, my adverb of time, today. My object, a brief, a letter. Stadig, my adverb, slowly. Place, my adverbial phrase, in my kamer, in my room. There is no verb 2 in this sentence, but I have an infinitive, om te communiceer, to communicate. I write today a letter slowly in my room to communicate. If I take out the adverb today, then it sounds very close to the same syntax as we have in English. Now, not all sentences have to have the same element, every element at least. We can write sentences without a lot of its parts. So let's take a look. Ek skryf 'n brief in my kamer only contains a subject, a verb, an object, and a place. So the time, manner, a second verb, or an infinitive, if it doesn't have a place in our sentence, we simply just leave it out. I write a letter in my room. Sentences do not always have to be written in this order, however, but there are a couple of rules we need to keep in mind. We can begin with our adverb or adverbial phrases of time, manner, place, or even the infinitive, as long as we maintain that our verb be written in the second position. That first verb slot is a pillar around which our sentence is constructed. Write the remaining parts of the sentence in the order that they would normally be written, just leaving out the part that we've already written. Note that beginning a sentence with a verb means that we're going to change it into a question or a command. We'll take a look at those closer to the end of this video. Beginning with the object of a sentence changes it into the passive voice, and it complicates our sentence because it changes the meaning without changing it entirely. But don't worry, we'll take a look at passive voice in a future video. So we can start with any of the following. We can start with our time or our manner or our place or an infinitive, as long as we maintain our first verb position directly after it. Our sentence will be fine. Our sentence will remain in the active voice and the meaning will remain unchanged. We're just saying that the time in this sentence is more important, or perhaps the manner or where something is happening, or the reason that something is being done. So there's multiple reasons why we would want to do this, as long as you remember that putting the verb in that second position maintains its integrity, otherwise it falls apart and the meaning goes away. So, a couple of examples. Ek skryf vandag, I write today. Vandag skryf ek, today write I. Stadig skryf ek, slowly write I. In my kamer skryf ek, in my room write I. Om te communiceer skryf ek, to communicate write I. Now, you can see that in English this sounds quite silly, but in Afrikaans, if that verb is not written in that second position, we will not have a comprehensible sentence. Next, Let's take a look at what can happen if we start our sentences with verbs. Firstly, how to change a sentence into a question. Now, this is relatively easy. We just move our verb to the front. In other words, we move our verb one position and our subject, and we swap them around. Ek skryf 'n brief in my kamer. I write a letter in my room. If I just swap my first verb position and my subject around, all of a sudden it changes into a question. Write I a letter in my room? That's the direct translation. Conceptually, I'm asking, do I write a letter in my room? Now, the same thing is going to happen if we move my verb to the front and I drop a subject. It's going to change the sentence, but this time it's going to change a sentence into a command. Consider the sentence, Ek skryf 'n brief in my kamer. I write a letter in my room. Now, if I just omit or if I leave out the subject ek, that will move the verb to the front of the sentence, but at the same time, I'll change it into a command or an instruction. Skryf 'n brief in my kamer, or in English, write a letter in my room. Now, we still need quite a bit of vocabulary so that we can recognize which words belong in which positions in my sentence. Otherwise, we're going to be lost and we're going to be stuck guessing. So keep practicing every day to ace Afrikaans. I'll see you all next time.